Real lovers, what is going on? Today we got to talk about being single by choice versus single by default. Oh my goodness, yo. We got to talk about it today. Okay, so let's dive right in. What does it mean to be single by choice? I'm sure you probably heard people say this all the time. Yo, I'm single by choice. I'm single by choice. And you probably haven't heard much about single by default. So I'm going to get into that in a minute. But let's start with single by choice. Single by choice is when a person is currently not dating and there is a specific purpose for why they're not dating in this season. The key thing about dating by choice is that it is for a temporary period of time. Oh my goodness. Underline, highlight, put that in bold. It's supposed to be for a temporary period of time. Right? So what you often do is you have to identify first the purpose for why you're choosing to be single. That could be to heal, work on yourself. It could be because you are pursuing your education, your career. It could be family priorities. There's a number of different reasons why a person may choose to be single. But at the end of the day, in addition to having that purpose, you also have to set a time frame, a very specific period of time for which you're doing that. You're not going to be working on and developing yourself in, a core area forever. You're not going to be pursuing your career and your education with where it needs to keep you from pursuing dating forever. So it's important to recognize that the key thing when it comes to single by choice is you got a specific reason and it's a temporary period of time in which you're doing it. Now, when we talk about single by default, man, oh man, this is the one where most people are totally unaware that they're actually single by default. And I'm going to get into it. I definitely was somebody that thought I was single by choice, but sis, I was totally single by default, which means you're single because you're actually unwilling or you're afraid to actively date. Yeah, that's a tough one, man. Let that one sink in. Single by default is when you're single because you're actually unwilling or you're afraid to actively date. I recently released a video not too long ago talking about passivity in dating or taking a passive approach to dating and approaching men. Like oftentimes single men and single women who are passively approaching dating and relationships, they are single by default. I would say about 9 times out of 10. That's definitely been my experience. So let's kind of talk about, what the issues are with both of these. Because let's be clear, there are pros and cons to both being single by choice and being single by default. So let's start with being single by choice. Like some of the cons, some of the bad things that come along with, that is the fact that you can spend too many seasons of your life single by choice. That was my issue. Like real talk, that was my issue. I spent way too many seasons of my life in that season of I'm single by choice. And guess what? The other big thing about being single by choice, that's the downfall, is you can miss so many opportunities when you put yourself in a position of I am 100% focused and locked in. Why? Because that means you're in rejection mode. That means even if the thing that you need in your life, that thing that you've been praying and hoping and wishing that God will send your way, it comes in. Since you in 100% focus / rejection mode, it's a wrap. You don't even allow it to be entertained. You don't even consider it. That is definitely a huge con, a huge drawback of being single by choice. But as you could probably imagine, there's a lot more issues with being single by default. So let's talk about that. So single by default, one of the biggest things, and I've said it because I've experienced it, which is confusing it for being single by choice. Oh my goodness. It is so easy to slip from being single by choice. You may start off as single by choice, sis, and then you just start to fade into that single by default. And that really happens when you allow that time to go for too long. Like I mentioned before, when you allow that single by choice season to just, go on and on and on and on and on, at some point you stop being single by choice and you are now just single by default. It has nothing to do with you pursuing some type of purpose or something that has to get your priority and your focus and your time in that season. It's just you didn't just made the choice to just stay in that mode of passivity, right? Another one is, being single starts to become an excuse for you not actively dating or not dating at all, right? It becomes a really good excuse. I definitely have been there. People would be like, yo, you dating now? Nah, I'm not dating or in a relationship right now because, I'm single by choice. I'm working on me or blah, 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 whatever I would say, right? But I soon recognized in hindsight, looking back, like, bro, I would say I'm single by choice. I'm single by choice. And that's the reason why I'm not dating. But yo, it eventually became an excuse. At one point when it started out, it was real. It was true. I definitely was single by choice because I was working on myself. I was developing myself. For me, spiritually, working on, creating content, building right to real love and everything like that. Like I had to be in a season to do those things, but those seasons ended and I still was using that excuse if I'm single by choice by not actively dating, not actively, being out there doing what I should have been doing in that season of my life. Right. So that's definitely another one that you got to watch out for, ladies. And here's the kicker, right? Prolong the season. You're going to prolong it. It's going to be way too long. You're going to look up and you've been single by default for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, God forbid, 20 years of your life. You just single by default. You can count how many dates, how many relationships you've been in on one hand. God forbid, two hands even, right? Two hands in 20 years. Like, yo, come on now. We ain't out here serial dating, but let's be real. If we are dating less than one person a year over 20 years, that's not a good look. That's something that needs to be addressed, especially if you have a desire to get in a relationship, meet a great guy, and eventually get married, right? And the other one, this is another heavy one, right? Sis, like, let's get real for a second. Being single by default can actually mask some of your fears and your insecurities, like rejection. And I'm going to be real. I'll be transparent, right? Like me, I spent a lot of time, I would say about maybe 5 years. I wasted a good 5 years, I think in my late 20s, early 30s, right? I was saying I was single by choice, like I mentioned before, using it as an excuse. And the main reason why was because of the fact that I was masking some insecurities that I had. Around the time that I launched Right to Real Love and, kind of started this journey, I also had took a major leap of faith. I walked away from a great job that was paying me some buku bucks. And I went to having to, scrape and try to find a way to be able to take care of myself financially. And that was a huge adjustment to go from a position where money was not an issue when it came to, any area of my life for the most part, to now being in a place where, like, not that I couldn't afford a date, but it was just more so like that inner turmoil of like, yo, I don't even make as much as I was making. And what woman gonna want to be with me if I ain't even making as much as I was making? Like, those was kind of the thoughts that I had going through my mind. But I'm saying, oh, I'm single by choice because I'm working on myself or developing it. But nah, it was being masked by the fact that, yo, I had some insecurities about the amount of money I was making and what I thought women would perceive in me if I wasn't at a place that I had been before when I was out there actively dating and doing my thing, right? Because I had that level of confidence knowing that, my paper and all of that stuff is together. Now, for ladies, it might be a little bit different, right? Like, I can't really speak from a woman's perspective, but maybe you can share if you're willing to do that. I know that women oftentimes will mask some fears and some insecurities as well, right? But at the end of the day, I want to help you ladies out, right? So whether you're single by default or single by choice, whatever it may be, let's talk about how long you should remain in those seasons, right? So I think for being single by choice, right? You are in pursuit of a purpose of some form, but it also has to be a time period set on it. I feel like you should not be single by choice for more than 5 years. It should be 5 years or less being single by choice, because when you start getting into more than 5 years of your life, you have just like put dating on the sideline. I promise you, you will look up, you will blink, and so many years have gone by and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do at that time? And you may put yourself in a position where you either one, be like some people, they give up. They put their hands up and be like, all right, well, I guess I'm never getting married. Or you find yourself in a position where like you scrambling. So it's like now you got to learn how to get out there, how to be more active, how to be interactive, how to deal with rejection, how to put yourself in a position where you're able to date more people. Like you having to learn on the fly as you go, as opposed to if you would have just been like, okay, that season of single by choice is over. I'm now transitioning into a place where I want to start actively dating. I can start working on myself and doing that instead of just waiting, instead of just continuing to reject, continuing to be in that 100% focused rejection mode. And you're putting yourself in a position where it's going to be a lot challenging for you to go after and get what you want when you do finally say, hey, I got to make that shift. I got to be more active in my approach, right? So before we go, ladies, I think the most important thing for you to know is which one of those categories are you currently in? And most importantly, which one do you desire to be in, right? So there's 3 categories. We talked about 2 and the third one was kind of, implied, but I'm going to state it explicitly here, right? So the first category that we talked about was being single by choice. Number 2 was being single by default. And then the third one is you're single and you're actively dating, right? That's the one that's going to get you the results that you want. That's the one that's going to help you to attract men, eventually get into a relationship, get engaged, and marry the man that you truly want to be your husband, right? So ladies, which one do you desire? Like, you got to be real. Do you truly desire to be dating single? Do you truly desire to be single and actively dating? Because if that desire isn't there, then your actions aren't going to match it, right? You have to make sure that when you get into that mode, it matches the desire that you have, right? Because when your actions are being propelled by your desire, you're going to be able to pick up momentum at a much faster pace as opposed to trying to act on something that you really aren't driven or desiring that much. So that's important. And when it's single by choice, ladies, make sure that you recognize that it has to be a timestamp on that. You don't want to do it too long, right? Oh, and my bad. I was telling y'all about the length of time. I gave y'all the length of time for single by choice, but I totally, it slipped my mind to give you the time limit for, single by default, right? So you do not want to be single by default, in my humble opinion, for more than a year. Like, seriously, like if you find yourself having gone a whole year and you're not single by choice, you're just single by default, don't let 2 years, 3 years creep up and you find yourself being single by default. Like that is like purgatory on some real stuff. Like you don't want to be there. I've been there. It's not a good look. You going to look back and be like, dang, I wasted so much time. Like I could have been having so many great experiences. I probably could have been in, at the very least, a great relationship, or maybe even been married and have started my family by now, but I wasn't actively dating. I was just single by default, just kicking back and not taking no action and going after what I want. Ladies, I don't want that to be you. I want you to get the things that you desire, attract the type of men into your life that you want to attract, and have healthy, amazing relationships and ultimately marriage. I hope you found value in what we talked about today, and I definitely look forward to coming back and diving into some other deeper topics with you in the future. Until then, I love y'all. Stay blessed, live, and love life. Thank God. Deuces.